Sergeant Dean Miles had been on Meraxis for 146 days. His mission: monitor energy fluctuations from a suspected abandoned research facility deep beneath the frozen crust. The official reports claimed it was empty, but command wasn't convinced. Dean's orders were clear: establish an outpost, maintain surveillance, and stay off the grid. No contact unless absolutely necessary. Alone, cold, and buried under bureaucratic secrecy, he operated in silence. He was a recon survivalist, 42 years old, ex-Terran Special Forces, with 3 failed marriages and an honorable discharge. Field work was simpler. You stayed alive, reported findings, and didn't make promises you couldn't keep. The cold didn't care who you used to be. That night, Dean sat on a crate beside the field stove, rubbing warmth into his hands. The wind outside hammered the tent in irregular pulses. Every gust made the fabric ripple and groan. Visibility had dropped to 0 hours ago. His thermal HUD displayed minus 61 degrees Celsius, with gusts reaching 130 kilometers per hour. Storm level 4. Movement outside in these conditions meant death in under 15 minutes. He stared at the soft blue glow of the scanner on his wrist. Static filled most of the screen, distorted by the magnetic storms. But then, something changed. A pulse. Then another. Bio sign detected. Distance, 27 meters temp. 32.2 degrees Celsius status. Unstable. Dean froze. He adjusted the scanner to verify. Still there, moving barely. Weak vitals. Approaching. His pulse quickened. He stood, strapped his weapon to his chest, threw on a thermal hood, and zipped the tent open. The cold punched him in the chest. Snow whipped in every direction, thick as a white curtain. Visibility was down to less than 5 meters. Dean activated the shoulder-mounted light and stepped out into the chaos. The HUD inside his visor pinged, guiding him through the whiteout. His boots crunched through the snow. His breath tightened in his chest, not from the cold, but from tension. No one was supposed to be here. No patrols. No friendlies. If this was a trap, it was a bold one. 12 meters out, he spotted movement. A figure stumbled forward, barely upright. Slender. Staggering. Then collapsing. Dean sprinted the last steps. He reached her just as she fell to her knees, catching her before her face hit the snow. Her skin was bluish, lips cracked, eyes half-lidded and glowing faintly gold. She was humanoid, clearly female, but with alien features, feline-shaped pupils, a slightly elongated jawline, and pointed ears flattened against her head. Her suit was in tatters. The metallic material clung to her body in strips, torn and frostbitten. One leg of the suit had split completely from thigh to ankle. She had no gloves. Her hands were red, trembling uncontrollably. She looked up at him, blinking slowly. "Please, warmth," she whispered. Dean's training kicked in. He checked for weapons. None. No visible tech implants. She wasn't carrying anything. Not even boots. Just survival instinct left in her eyes. He lifted her in one motion and turned back toward the tent, using his body to block the wind. Her skin was ice against his chest, but he didn't slow down. Back inside, he dropped the flap and secured the seal. Warmth rushed back into the space. He laid her on the cot, unzipped her remaining gear halfway to assess injuries. She winced but didn't resist. Her core temperature was plummeting. He grabbed a high-density thermal blanket and wrapped it around her tightly. Then he activated 2 heating packs and slid them beneath her arms and across her torso. Her eyes fluttered open again. "Zia," she said. "My name." Dean didn't answer. He worked quickly, checking vitals, administering a hydration tab in her mouth, and prepping the emergency rewarming fluid. She coughed after swallowing, then gave him a weak nod. "Dean," she whispered, reading the name off his uniform. He leaned back, breathing heavier now. The adrenaline was wearing off. "You're lucky. A few more minutes out there, and you'd be a corpse." She watched him, her breathing uneven. Her voice had an odd cadence. Terran standard, but broken. "You human soldier?" "Recon. Off the grid. No support team." She nodded slowly. "I heard your patrol." "Heard signal. They said, someone's still here." Dean's eyes narrowed. Who's that? Zia hesitated. Her lips parted, but the words caught in her throat. Facility, underground, she said. I escaped. Dean sat still. You mean the research bunker? Krata, sublevel 6. She nodded faintly. That place has been shut down for 8 years. We thought everyone inside was dead. No, she said. They kept us alive. Modified. Dean's gut tightened. His mind raced. Valari, an extinct or displaced species after the resource war. But some records hinted at black site projects. Biogenetics. Splicing. Valari were rumored to have been used for off-the-books hybrid experimentation. Cloaking, muscle density, regenerative tissue. You were part of the program? He asked. I didn't choose it. Dean looked her over again. Her arms were thin, but lined with a dense muscle structure. Her irises had vertical slits, likely augmented for night vision. Her heart rate was stabilizing, but barely. She was clearly enhanced. Engineered, but broken. She shifted under the blanket. Humans, you use warmth. Body contact for survival. Sometimes, he said slowly. Mostly just heating equipment. Zia tilted her head, studying him. Would contact help recovery? Dean kept his face neutral, but inside, alarms were going off. Is that what they taught you? He asked. She didn't answer directly. I don't know what's normal anymore. He stood, suddenly aware of how quiet the storm had gotten outside. The heater buzzed. Zia's eyes followed him closely, not in fear, but as if she were learning him. He grabbed a second blanket and tossed it onto the cot. Sleep. We'll talk in the morning. She didn't protest. She pulled the blanket higher and curled inward, eyes still open, alert. Dean sat against the opposite wall and kept his rifle within reach. He couldn't sleep now, not with her presence filling the tent like a loaded weapon. Her arrival wasn't coincidence. It never was in Black Ops stories. But looking at her now, trembling and bruised, he didn't see a spy or an assassin. He saw someone who'd clawed her way out of a lab and nearly died for it. Whatever her reasons were for coming here, one thing was clear. Someone had lied. She wasn't supposed to exist. And now she was lying 10 feet away from him, alive, enhanced, and staring straight into his world. The storm outside had calmed, but the real one had just begun. Dean didn't sleep. He sat with his back against the tent wall, eyes fixed on a cot across from him. The heating unit hummed softly, casting a steady warmth over the cramped space. Outside, the storm had weakened to a distant howl, no longer violent, just persistent. Snow tapped lightly against the canvas, but inside, silence ruled. Zia had fallen asleep an hour earlier, or at least she appeared to. Her breathing was slow, steady, her eyes closed, but not deeply. Dean had seen enough trauma cases to recognize defensive sleep when he saw it. She didn't trust him yet, just as he didn't fully trust her. He checked the wrist scanner again. Still no other biosigns. No drones. No activity within 5 clicks. Whatever she escaped from, they weren't tracking her here, at least not yet. His mind kept circling the same unanswered questions. How did she survive outside in that condition? Why was her body still functional despite exposure? What exactly had been done to her in that facility? She spoke fragmented Terran, knew enough about human customs to mimic concern for body warmth, and she wasn't surprised by a soldier's presence. That wasn't an accident. Someone trained her, or programmed her, to seek out this exact kind of situation. A lone recon soldier. Isolated, unquestioned, disposable. And yet, she hadn't tried to harm him. She didn't sabotage the tent, didn't attempt to steal his weapon. No manipulation, just survival, just pain. He stood slowly, stretched the stiffness from his shoulders, and approached the cot. Her eyes opened instantly. No sudden movements. Not yet, she said quietly. Dean crouched beside her. You're alert. Good sign. Couldn't afford not to be. You slept with your back to the wall. Old soldier's habit. She hesitated. Old prisoner's habit. He nodded once. Tell me how you got out. Zia sat up slightly, adjusting the thermal blanket. Her hair, now dry, clung to her face. The bruises on her collarbone were darker in the morning light. I escaped through the subvent corridor, she said. One of the guards left a panel open. I crawled for almost an hour. Pipes. Cold metal. No shoes. No alarm was triggered. There was one, but it didn't reach the surface. Internal loop only. I overheard them arguing. Systems are failing. Something underground is breaking down. Dean narrowed his eyes. You were supposed to die in there. I wasn't alone, she added. Dean straightened. There are more like you? There were. She looked down at her hands. 3 of us. The others didn't make it out. He absorbed that in silence. What were they doing to you? Her hands tightened on the blanket. Testing pain thresholds. Regeneration. Neural recalibration. They wanted to see how far Valari biology could be bent without breaking. And how far did they get? I broke, she said, her voice flat. Dean stood and walked to his gear case. He retrieved a protein packet, rehydrated it, and set it next to her. She picked it up slowly, sniffed it first, then took a cautious bite. I'm not a threat, Dean, she said between bites. I wouldn't have risked this just to attack you in your sleep. Maybe not, but people trained in containment facilities tend to have backup plans. I had no plan, just coordinates. I knew there was a recon unit posted here. One signal left active. They never shut you down. Dean stared at her. That was true. Creta 7 wasn't listed as a decommissioned post, but it was marked low priority. He was sent here not to discover anything, just to observe nothing. I'm not going back, she said. That depends who's looking for you. If they find me, they won't take me alive. Dean said nothing. She stood carefully, blanket still wrapped around her. Her legs wobbled slightly, but she caught herself. You have to decide something, she said. Do you report me, or do you help me? Dean watched her move, observed the scar on her thigh, the stitched wound near her ribs. She hadn't been built to fight. She had been built to survive pain, to endure. And something about that struck him harder than he expected. You're assuming I have orders that still matter. You do, even if no one's watching. Dean turned and opened the storage crate. He handed her a fresh thermal base layer uniform. Oversized but clean. She accepted it without a word. There's a wash module behind the tent. 10 minutes max, he said. Storm's light now, but that can change. She nodded once and stepped outside, moving slow but determined. When she was gone, Dean sat back down and activated his field console. The signal uplink blinked, offline. No transmission, no outgoing comms. It had been disabled 4 days ago. Routine maintenance, command claimed. Now he saw the lie. They didn't want him reporting anything. He closed the terminal, sat in silence. She wasn't just a survivor. She was a leak, a witness to something that was never meant to see daylight again. And for reasons he couldn't fully explain yet, he believed her. When the flap opened again, Zia stepped inside, wearing the new uniform. She moved more steadily now. Her skin had regained color, and her eyes were sharper. Dean met her gaze. We've got 3 days before my backup drone makes its next sweep. If we move, it has to be before then. She blinked. You're helping me? No, I'm helping myself not live with the consequences of handing you over. She allowed herself a small smile. You think you can outrun them? No, but I can make enough noise that someone has to listen. Zia's face hardened. Then we'd better make it count. Dean grabbed his weapon. Pack lightly. They didn't say anything else. But in the silence between them, something had shifted. No longer captor and escapee. Not enemies. Not yet allies. But connected by choice. And by the threat of what hunted her from below. They were no longer waiting out the cold. They were walking straight into the fire. The pack weighed heavier than Dean expected, but he didn't mention it. He kept his pace steady through the jagged ridgeline west of Creta 7. Zia walked half a step behind him, her breaths measured, her expression focused. She didn't speak. Neither did he. The ice crunched beneath their boots as the wind sliced through the canyon in low, guttural tones. The midday light on Meraxis was cold and pale, offering visibility but no warmth. They'd been walking for almost 2 hours. Dean had planned the route carefully, cutting through terrain where sensor interference was high due to mineral deposits. It was the only way to stay invisible to drones or recon satellites. But the risk of exposure was rising with each hour. The facility that had altered Zia might be down there, breaking apart, but that didn't mean it couldn't still reach out to clean up its mistakes. Zia's breathing changed. Not labored, but tense. Dean stopped, turned. You holding up? I've been in worse conditions, she said quietly. You're not in a lab anymore. No, but something still feels wrong. Dean scanned the terrain. There was nothing obvious, just craggy stone and snow-blasted cliffs. But he trusted her instincts more than he trusted any scanner. He checked the satellite band on his wrist. No direct uplink, but a faint ping registered low-orbit drone activity. Too high to track their movements directly, but close enough to signal one thing. Someone was looking. He pulled her into the side of the rock face, behind a jagged outcrop. Stay low, he said. Zia crouched beside him. How long do we have? Maybe 3 hours. Maybe 10 minutes. Depends if they're sweeping or coming straight for us. She looked past him to the distant ridgeline. There's a place. North of here. I remember seeing it on old maps the scientists used. An abandoned Volari command outpost from before the war. Dean raised an eyebrow. Those were buried with the cities. Not all of them, she said. One was partially unearthed during seismic testing. They used it as a side station for geological scans. Dean hesitated. What's inside? She shrugged. Probably nothing. But it's underground. Shielded. Warm. He nodded. Lead the way. Zia took point, her footing confident despite the terrain. Her memory was sharp. She moved with a soldier's sense of spacing, never exposing herself too long on open ground. Dean watched closely, evaluating her behavior. Whatever training she had, it had been thorough. They reached the edge of a ravine after another hour. Below, a collapsed tunnel entrance barely jutted out from the rock. Snow had covered most of it. Only a sliver of the curved arch remained visible. Dean pulled out a collapsible shovel and started digging. Zia joined without being asked. They worked in silence, clearing out the entrance until enough room was made to crawl through. The moment the path opened, warm air, heavy with stale dust, met their faces. They slipped inside. The interior was narrow and pitch black. Dean activated his shoulder light. The beam caught faded symbols along the walls. Volari script, carved with precision. The tunnel sloped downward into darkness. At the far end, a sealed doorway stood intact. Zia stepped forward and placed her hand over the biometric lock. Nothing happened. She frowned. They deactivated the primary power cores. Dean stepped past her, removed the side panel, and connected a portable fusion cell to the old system. The panel bust. A moment later, the door hissed and slid halfway open. They pushed it the rest of the way and stepped inside. The bunker was small, maybe 6 rooms total. Storage crates lined the walls. Old display terminals sat dormant under a thick coat of dust. A generator thrummed somewhere in the back, still holding enough charge to keep the temperature above freezing. Zia collapsed onto a bench, not from exhaustion, but from the sudden psychological weight of being somewhere safe. Dean checked the doors, the vents, every corner. Then he sat across from her. She looked up. I thought about this place every night in that facility. It was just a story to me until now. Dean studied her. How long were you in there? 4 years. Maybe more. Time blurs when you don't see stars. He leaned forward. Why you? What made you valuable to them? Zia didn't answer at first. Her eyes fixed on the floor. I didn't volunteer. My mother was Volari. My father was Terran, military. I was born on a colony world. When the war came, they took hybrids. Said they needed genetic material to rebuild both sides. Said I could be the future. Dean frowned. You were a test subject from birth? They call me a bridge species. Said I could adapt better than full-blood Volari. They didn't test theories. They built weapons. I was one. Dean sat back, absorbing the weight of her words. And now, he asked, what do you want now? Zia looked up, her voice steady. To stop being a tool, and to make sure no one ever creates another like me. Dean didn't answer. The silence stretched. Somewhere above them, snow began to fall again, heavier now. Then a sound. Faint. Mechanical. Far off, but moving. Dean rose immediately. He rushed to the surface scanner embedded in the wall. Powered it up using his fusion cell. A small 3D grid lit up. 2 unidentified signatures. Approaching from high altitude. Fast. They found us, he said. Zia stood. Extraction unit? Worse, Dean said. Kill sweep. Minimal detection. Maximum silence. She didn't flinch. They don't want a scandal. They want no trace. Dean turned to her. Then we have to disappear. There's an emergency tunnel, Zia said. One of the old engineers showed me the blueprints once. Leads to a buried landing bay. If we can power it. Dean was already pulling his toolkit. We got 20 minutes max. Zia moved to the opposite side of the chamber, locating the access panel. Together, without needing to speak, they worked, cutting through old security seals, rerouting power from the reserve core, and opening the emergency corridor. As the doors slid open, a gust of frigid air rushed in. Zia looked down the long, dark tunnel, her expression unreadable. "Time to stop running," she said. Dean gave her one look. Then they stepped into the dark, shoulder to shoulder, not fleeing anymore, but heading toward the truth. Whatever waited at the other end, they were done surviving alone. Now, they would fight together. The emergency corridor sloped downward, carved through the permafrost with ancient Valari precision. Dean's boots echoed softly with every step, the tunnel walls narrowing around them. His shoulder light barely reached the far end of the passage. Zia moved ahead of him, her hand occasionally brushing the wall, tracing embedded symbols. Old Valari sigils for command, access, shield. They looked worn, as if time itself had tried to erase them. "We're close," she said without turning back. Her voice sounded different here, tighter, like something was pressing down on her chest. Dean checked his scanner again. The high-altitude signatures from the previous hour were gone, but that didn't mean they'd stopped looking. Stealth units often disabled external emissions before ground approach. It was only a matter of time. They reached a steel hatch half buried in frost. Zia pulled the manual release lever. It groaned but didn't budge. Dean stepped forward, pulled a plasma cutter from his kit, and made a clean vertical incision. Sparks flew. The hatch released with a jolt, revealing a long, dark chamber beyond. They stepped through into what looked like an ancient hangar bay. The air was stale, but breathable. Massive support beams arched overhead. The ceiling showed cracks from tectonic shifts. On the far side of the hangar sat a partially buried Valari transport, sleek, triangular, coated in dust and snow. Dean approached the ship. "Think it still flies?" "Not on its own," Zia said, "but its systems might still talk to yours." Dean moved to the side hatch and tapped the panel. No response. He stripped the casing open and ran a bypass through his portable fusion drive. The console flickered, groaned, then lit up. A deep blue glow pulsed from inside the ship. Zia climbed in behind him. The interior was intact, tight but functional. He activated a secondary system scan while she moved toward the cockpit. Dean's wristcom buzzed, static than a voice. "Sergeant Dean Miles. Authorization Delta 7 Black. Respond." He froze. The voice was clear, crisp, and unmistakably military. "Sergeant Miles, this is Commander Laron Tate, Special Project Division. We are aware of your unauthorized movement from Creta 7. You are carrying a priority asset marked Experimental Class 3. Stand by for secure extraction." Dean stared at the comm, jaw tightening. Zia stepped back into view. "Who is it?" He didn't answer immediately. The voice returned. "Sergeant, respond and confirm status of the subject. You're not authorized to engage in independent recovery." Dean muted the channel. Zia's expression hardened. "You know him." "I serve under him," Dean said quietly. "Tate used to run Black Ops asset retrieval. If he's involved, this isn't cleanup. It's containment. No witnesses." Zia's voice stayed low. "He'll be close. He'll come in person." Dean nodded. "Which means we can't run yet. We hit back first." Zia stepped past him and opened the rear panel of the ship. Inside were supply crates, sealed but intact. She cracked one open. Inside, medical kits, low-yield explosives, and a Valari-designed cloaking emitter. Dean raised his brow. "Convenient. They use Valari tech to build the facility. I told you, this was their blueprint. They just stole it." He stepped back, calculating quickly. "We rigged the cloaking emitter to the corridor. Lure them in. When they breach, they'll think we're deeper in the system. And we strike from above, Zia said. Dean looked at her, the corners of his mouth tight. You've done this before. No, but I've thought about it. Dean opened the crate fully and pulled out the emitter. He calibrated it, linked it to his HUD, then turned to her. I need you to do something, he said. If this goes south, I need you to take that ship and run. Don't wait. Don't look back. Zia stared at him for a moment. I won't leave you behind. Not optional. You'll die. Dean met her eyes firm. I've been dying slowly on this moon for years. This is the first damn thing I've done that matters. Zia's face was unreadable. Then, quietly, you still think you're just a soldier. I'm a man who made peace with what I lost, he said. That doesn't mean I won't make someone else pay for what they took from you. They moved quickly after that. The emitter was placed. Traps armed. Defensive positions set. The hangar bay became a silent battlefield. 37 minutes later, the sensors pinged again. This time, no altitude. Just boots. 5, maybe 6 operatives. Moving with purpose. No comms. No lights. Dean crouched above the corridor hatch, rifle drawn, breath steady. The first figure appeared in view. Black armor. Matte finish. No insignia. Full visor. Behind him 2 others. Coordinated. Trained. Dean waited. Counted to 5. Then triggered the flash charge. The corridor filled with white light and sound. Disoriented footsteps. Shouts. Zia moved beside him, dropped one of them with a stun round to the neck. Dean fired a clean shot into the leg of another, dragging him down. The third scrambled, but was intercepted by Dean's blade across his chest plate. Not fatal, but enough to collapse his breathing. Seconds later, it was over. Only one remained conscious, pinned under a fallen steel beam. His helmet cracked. Dean pulled it off. It was someone he didn't recognize. Young. I was panicked. Why is Tate here? Dean demanded. He said the asset breached planetary protocols. The man gasped. Said no one could know what she is. She's not a thing, Dean growled. She's a person. Zia stood over him. Tell Tate. He'll have to bury more than just data this time. Dean raised his rifle, but didn't fire. Instead, he stepped back. Leave him. Zia nodded. It's the message that matters. They returned to the ship. Dean rerouted the NAV systems. It would take an hour to charge. Zia sat in the co-pilot's seat, staring ahead. What happens now, she asked. Dean looked out the cockpit window toward the tunnel behind them. Now we expose them. He sat beside her. Finally, side by side, not as fugitive and handler, not as survivor and protector, but as partners. Outside, the wind rose again. But this time, neither of them flinched. They weren't running anymore. They were ready to fight. The transport's engines hummed softly beneath the floor. Warm lights pulsed along the dashboard as systems came online one by one. Zia sat in the co-pilot's seat, her fingers hovering over the controls, still unsure whether she belonged here, on a ship, in charge of her own movement, her own future. It was a feeling she hadn't had in years. Dean worked beside her, his brow furrowed in concentration. He bypassed the old Volari navigation lock and rerouted power from the auxiliary node to boost their shield strength. He was good at it, methodical, calm, efficient. Not flashy, just capable. Zia had spent most of her life around people who only cared about control, precision, obedience. Dean was different. He didn't try to lead her. He included her. The ship's main display blinked, then displayed a local topographic map of Sector 9. One small beacon flashed in the lower right quadrant. RS Archive 27E. Zia leaned closer. That wasn't there before. Dean studied it. Coordinates are hard-coded into the ship's memory. Someone wanted it preserved. Zia nodded. Volari tech wasn't just used to build ships. They stored data in physical nodes, sealed inside the ship's structure, unreachable unless you knew where to look. Dean tapped the beacon. The display zoomed in. Underground facility. Elevation minus 140 meters. Reinforced vault. Marked as Experimental Archive / Observation Vault Epsilon. He exhaled slowly. That's where we'll find the truth. Zia didn't speak right away. Then, you know they won't let you walk away after this. Dean looked at her. I stopped walking away when you fell into my arms. Her eyes lingered on his for a moment. Then she nodded. They set the course. The ship lifted slowly, its hull groaning from years of disuse. Outside, Meraxes stretched in all directions, flat ice fields broken only by shattered ridges and buried structures, silent witnesses to a war no one ever wanted to remember. The sky above was a muted gray, but it was the clearest horizon either of them had seen in days. As they flew, Dean accessed a secure data tablet he had buried in his rucksack back at Kratos 7. The device was unregistered, wiped of standard protocols, but still contained a full log of the facility's known experiments, coded under Terran Military Science Initiative Project Echo Verge. It was a project Dean had been warned never to investigate. Now he was pulling it apart line by line. He stopped at one entry. His hand froze. Subject 13 AZ, he read aloud. Hybrid Valari Terran. Genetic manipulation. Pain conditioning. Accelerated healing. Brainwave training modules. Success rate, 61%. Cognitive stability, pending. Asset terminated, status, false. Zia's face changed. Not surprise. Recognition. That was me, she said. Dean looked up. They logged you as terminated. She nodded. They tried. The test was designed to break neural cohesion. I passed. They called it a failure. He set the tablet down. How many others like you? 27 were created. 18 were destroyed. 5 escaped into the wilds, probably didn't survive. 3 were sealed for off-world transport. I was the only one left when the power grid started to collapse. Dean's voice tightened. They never planned to release you. They never planned for me to live long enough to escape. The ship descended near the beacon site. They found the vault buried under 10 meters of frozen ash and glass. A small entrance bay protruded from the snow, its doors warped from past seismic activity. Dean triggered the override. The walls hissed and opened slowly. The inside was untouched. A cold, sterile corridor led them deeper underground. Lighting strips flickered to life as they walked, revealing clean metallic walls etched with faded Valari patterns. At the end of the hallway, a sealed door waited. Dean scanned it with his field tool. Encryption, Terran military. Level 7. Not Valari at all. They took over the site and buried it, he muttered. He connected his bypass unit. I can crack it, but I'll need time. Zia turned to stand watch. I'll hold them off if they get close. Dean smiled faintly. You'll be standing next to me when we open it. The vault door opened with a slow hiss. Cold air rolled out. Inside was a single control room, circular, lined with memory cores, servers, and interface nodes. Everything had power. Everything was active. And in the center, a stasis pod. Inside, a figure. Zia stepped forward, breath caught in her throat. It was a younger girl, Valari, maybe 17, her features nearly identical to Zia's. Same glowing eyes. Same markings on her temple. Frozen. Suspended. Zia's voice shook. Her name was Sari. She was my genetic sister. They separated us. Dean approached the interface. The logs were clear. Sari was the final subject. The one Zia had been told didn't survive. But she had, cryogenically stored. Experiment suspended due to instability in subject 13 AZ. She was your replacement, Dean said quietly. No, she was my proof. That I was never the only one. That this wasn't survival. It was planned. Zia stepped forward and placed her palm on the glass. Her voice was barely audible. We're taking her. Dean didn't argue. They began the extraction process. Dean downloaded all logs onto a secure drive, capturing communications, orders, biological studies, all of it. Enough to bring down the division if it reached the right ears. As the data reached 90%, Dean's comm crackled again. This time, the voice wasn't Tate's. It was Major Elaine Braddock, Dean's former CEO, once his friend, now different. Miles, you gone too far. You were never meant to see this. But I'm not here to stop you. I'm here to warn you. Dean froze. Braddock, there's a cleanup unit already inbound. Not Black Ops. Not Terran Command. Private. Off-chain. Dean looked at Zia. What the hell does that mean? Braddock continued. They've gone independent. Echo Verge is no longer under military control. It's corporate now, and they want every trace of it erased, including you. Zia's eyes hardened. Then we move. Now. Dean grabbed the data core. Where can we go? Braddock's voice lowered. There's a shuttle beacon at Deep Relay Post Sigma, 60 clicks west. You'll need to broadcast wideband. Get someone off-planet to listen. Why are you helping us? Dean asked. Because I should have burned it all down years ago. The signal cut. Dean looked at Zia. She didn't ask if they were going. She was already activating the pod's mobile transport cradle. They were out of time. But now, they weren't just escaping with evidence. They were escaping with someone who was never supposed to exist. And that changed everything. The sled-mounted cradle hovered just a few inches above the ice, carrying Sari's cryopod behind the Volari transport like a silent passenger from another world. The engine's low hum was barely audible above the whipping wind, but every vibration reminded Dean that time was closing in. They pushed west toward Deep Relay Post Sigma, once a long-range comm relay station, now a forgotten husk buried in frost. It was their only chance to send the archived data off-world before Echo Verge's private strike team erased everything. Dean stood at the helm of the small command deck, one hand on the flight stabilizer, the other on his rifle. He glanced at the radar again. No new signals. But that was never reassuring. These people didn't come in loud. Zia sat beside him, her eyes locked on the cryopod. Her expression was unreadable, but Dean could see the tension in her hands, clenched, rigid. She hadn't said a word since they'd left the vault. She's going to be okay, he said, not just to reassure her, but to anchor the thought in himself. Zia spoke quietly. You don't know that. No, Dean replied. But I know we didn't come this far to lose her now. Zia leaned back, her gaze fixed forward. I don't know who I'm more afraid of, Tate's team or the people behind them. We were tools, Dean, and tools are easy to replace. Dean nodded grimly. Not if you make enough noise. The ship descended toward Sigma Post, what remained of it. The facility looked like a skeletal hand buried in snow, its towers warped and rusted, the relay dish shattered in half. One comm tower still stood upright barely. The interior was likely intact enough to send a short-range burst. If they could get a signal through the ionosphere, someone beyond Meraxis might hear them. Dean landed the ship behind the outcropping, masking it with ice camo from the automated panel. They disembarked with Sari's pod on the hover cradle and moved fast. Inside, the station smelled of metal, ash, and oil. Most systems were dark. Dean bypassed the main grid, pulling power from his last fusion cell. Lights flickered to life. Zia went straight for the signal interface, plugging in the archive drive while Dean secured the entrance. We have about 2 minutes of power before this burns out, she said. Signal's weak, but it'll bounce. Do it, Dean said. Send everything. Logs, DNA profiles, video, everything from Vault Epsilon. She hesitated. There's something else here. A lock file. It's encrypted to your name. Dean stepped forward. The console blinked. Authorization required. Miles, Dean ID 739 Alpha. He frowned. I've never seen this before. Zia looked at him. They used your ID to access the facility. He input the code. The screen shifted. A single audio message played, crackled, clipped. Commander Tate, if you're hearing this, you've already broken protocol. You were never supposed to find her. You were never supposed to live long enough to care. Dean's jaw clenched. He reached for his comms, voice low. Zia, send the damn file. She hit transmit. The screen blinked. Transmission sent. Signal echo. Outbound confirmed. That's when the building shook. Outside, engines. Not above, ground level. A vehicle convoy. Fast moving. Close. Dean grabbed his weapon and pulled Zia to cover. We've got company. Zia rolled behind a pillar, rifle drawn. How many? Dean peered through the crack in the wall. For tactical transports. 6 men disembarked. Heavy armor, black visors, 0 insignia. Not Terran military. Corporate private security, high grade, off-chain, no accountability. Dean switched to thermal. 6 on foot, but they'll have snipers in Overwatch. The front doors exploded inward. Flash charges rolled in. Dean ducked and pulled Zia down, shielding her with his arm as light and pressure filled the corridor. Gunfire followed. Dean returned fire with precision. Controlled bursts aimed at knees and shoulders. Disable, not kill. These men were just weapons pointed in the wrong direction. But one moved differently. Not like the others. Not robotic. He stepped forward, visor up. Dean froze. It was Garrick Juno, a former reconnaissance lead from Dean's 1st Division, long since reported Kia during the Gray Line collapse on Idris 4. Except he was here, alive, wearing a PMC tag. Dean, Garrick said, didn't think they'd send you to babysit a mistake. Dean stepped out slowly, rifle raised. You're supposed to be dead. That was the point. New name, new contracts, better clients. Dean's voice was ice. You're working for Echo Verge? I'm working for people who pay better than ghosts and guilt. Zia stepped forward, rifle steady. You helped build that facility, didn't you? Garrick smiled. I helped bury it. Dean didn't lower his weapon. You're here to erase the evidence, including her. Garrick nodded. And you, unfortunately. But I've got a soft spot, Dean. Walk away. Leave the freak. I'll tell Tate you were never here. Dean didn't flinch. Her name is Zia. Silence hung in the air. Garrick sighed. Then this is the part where you die. He raised his weapon. Zia fired first. The round slammed into Garrick's shoulder, sending him spinning into the wall. Dean took the shot next, dropping 2 others who moved on reflex. Chaos erupted. Bullets ripped into the walls, sparks showering the hall. Dean covered Zia as they fell back through the corridor, dragging Sari's pod behind them. The station shook again. Charges had been planted. They reached the ship with seconds to spare. Dean hit the launch sequence as fire ripped through the rear of the comm station. Inside the cockpit, panting, bleeding from a graze across his side, Dean locked eyes with her. We made it, he said. Zia looked at him, breathing hard. No, we survived. Now we fight. Dean grinned grimly. Now we tell the whole galaxy who the monsters really are. As the ship punched through the upper atmosphere, the relay behind them burned. Data already gone, transmitted, floating in space beyond reach. They had escaped the first strike, but war had just been declared. 3 hours after the transmission left Meraxis orbit, it reached a passive relay drifting in Terran Senate-controlled space. The relay didn't belong to the military. It had been installed by the Orion Truth Network, a rogue AI-assisted investigative collective operating in the fringes of lawful communication. The signal hit their buffer like a seismic wave. Encrypted files, genetic experiments, audio logs of commanders denying existence of subjects they'd created. And the last recorded image, Zia, her face partially lit by a console screen, her voice stating her name and classification, Subject 13AZ. No filters, no edits, no deniability. The network's response was immediate. By the time Dean and Zia landed at a hidden supply post near the asteroid field of Sector 11D, the story had already fractured through the outer colonies. Pirate boards, science forums, even unregistered diplomatic terminals, everywhere. It wasn't just a leak. It was a detonation. Dean sat in a dim room inside the hidden outpost, eyes fixed on the holoscreen. He watched the news feed in silence. Unconfirmed Terran experiments linked to the outlawed Echo Verge program. Specimen recovered alive, half Valari, half human. Claims forced genetic manipulation and attempted termination. Terran Senate issues preliminary statement. Investigation pending. Dean muted the feed. Zia stood at the far end of the room, arms folded, watching him. You think it's enough? She asked. He turned to face her. It's the first time I've seen the Senate look like it doesn't know what to say. Which means they knew. Dean nodded. They always did. She crossed the room and sat beside him. We could run. The story's out. They'll be forced to act. They'll delay. Spin it. Say it's rogue factions. A breakdown in oversight. They'll need a scapegoat. And Tate's already preparing for it. Zia's eyes narrowed. Then we finish it. Dean opened the small, tactical briefcase on the table. Inside, a handheld data spike coded to his old clearance. This will get us into Tate's off-grid command post, if he hasn't burned it already. Zia took the spike. Where is it? Vesker Ring. Saturn orbit. An old weapons depot. They repurposed it for deep core testing. Nobody goes near it anymore. It's dead space. She looked at him. Then let's bury it. Dean didn't respond right away. He studied her posture, her eyes, her tone. She was colder now, focused. He'd seen that transformation before, in soldiers after too many missions. But something in her was still intact, something that hadn't given in. You could have walked away, he said. I've been walking away my whole life, she replied. Now I'm walking towards something. He reached across the table and handed her the sidearm he'd modified with Volari recoil dampeners. You'll need this. She accepted it without flinching. The next hours were silent preparation. They loaded supplies, bypassed tracking beacons, and charted a stealth route through the Sector 9 debris field to reach the Vesker ring. It would take 6 hours in deep drift. No engines, no noise, just silence. Dean sat in the cockpit as the ship coasted through the field. Sari's cryopod was secure below deck, connected to life support. They didn't speak of her. Not tonight. Zia joined him in the cockpit. Her presence was quiet, but grounding. Did you ever believe in the uniform? She asked. Dean nodded. At the start. And now? I believe in the people who wear it with integrity. But the structure behind it? It's just camouflage for power. Zia looked at him for a long moment. You could have killed Garrick. You didn't. Didn't need to. Letting him live with what he's become was worse. She gave the smallest hint of a smile. Then her voice turned serious again. What happens if we fail at Vesker? Dean looked out at the stars. Then they'll bury everything. Say we died during unauthorized engagement. Say Echo Verge never existed. Say you never existed. Zia straightened. Then let's make it impossible to forget me. The ship slowed near Vesker Ring, an enormous, half-derelict station floating in the black. Its structure curved like a broken jaw, bristling with sensor arrays and shield cores, half of them offline. A single hangar bay remained active, dim red lights pulsing like a heartbeat. Dean adjusted their approach vector. No turning back after this, he said. Zia stood behind him, steady. I'm already further than I was ever supposed to be. They touched down without alert. The ship's signature cloaking field masked them for 10 minutes, just enough to get inside. Dean and Zia suited up, armed, and entered through a pressure-sealed service tunnel that ran beneath the station's main command corridor. The air inside was cold, dry, quiet. Tate hadn't brought a full team. He wasn't expecting them. He thought they'd be dead by now, or in hiding. That was his first mistake. As they moved through the corridor, Dean's thoughts ran quieter than his pulse. He wasn't here for revenge. He was here for consequence. Zia moved beside him like a shadow, calm, calculating. For the first time since they met, Dean realized she no longer looked like someone surviving. She looked like someone choosing her fate. They reached the main control chamber. Tate was there, alone, waiting, unarmed. Dean stepped forward, rifle lowered but ready. Tate turned slowly. You really don't know when to die. Zia answered. Neither do you. He smiled faintly. You think this ends with me? Dean didn't blink. No, but it starts with you. Tate's expression hardened. Then let's make it clean. As he reached for the override panel, Zia moved first, crossed the room in 3 steps, disarmed him, and pinned him to the console. She didn't speak. She just looked at him like she was trying to see if he felt anything. He didn't. Dean walked to the panel. Broadcast is ready. Zia tightened her grip. This ends now. Dean keyed in the override. And for the first time, the full, uncut archive, including Tate's private logs, went live. To the public, to the Senate, to every outpost, fringe world, pirate rig, civilian network, and research station across the sectors. Zia released Tate. He dropped to the floor, hollow-eyed. Dean turned to her. Now we're ghosts. She met his eyes. No, now we're real. The station lights dimmed as they left. No alarms. No resistance. Just silence. They didn't need a war. They'd won with the truth. 2 weeks later, the storm had passed. But its echoes had only begun. The broadcast from Vesker Ring had spread across Terran space like wildfire. There was no way to contain it. Not even the Senate's best spin architects could explain away cryo-locked hybrid children, forced augmentation logs, and private kill teams dispatched without accountability. The term Echo Verge was no longer a classified project. It was now a scandal, a headline, a stain. On Station Lasura, a neutral diplomatic zone orbiting Terra Nova, the hearings began. Closed-door tribunals, public testimonies, disavowals, and resignations. The higher-ups didn't fall fast, but they fell hard. Commander Tate was officially detained pending investigation. Garrick Juno vanished from public records. And though Dean and Zia never stepped foot on Lasara, their names became synonymous with the case. Whistleblowers, survivors, proof. But neither of them cared about the coverage. They were on Tezsin 4, a quiet, forest-covered moon under non-aligned governance. No flags, no surveillance, just clean air, open land, and silence between the trees. Dean sat on the porch of a weather-worn outpost cabin, hands wrapped around a mug of black tea. He wore a plain shirt, a scar still fresh across his left forearm from the last firefight. His beard had grown in, but his eyes were sharper. At peace, grounded. Zia stood nearby under the shade of the tree lean, helping Sari walk across the grass for the first time. The girl was thin, pale, and adjusting slowly to life outside the cryopod. Her mind was still fragile, her memories scattered, but her laughter was real when the wind caught her hair. Dean watched them for a long while. No words. Then he stood, walked out to meet them. "How's she doing?" he asked softly. Zia glanced over, a small smile playing at the edge of her lips. Better today. She remembered the color of the sky. Dean looked up. Good day to remember that. Zia knelt beside Sari, brushing a lock of hair behind the girl's ear. She asked if we were still running. Dean crouched beside her. What did you tell her? That we stopped. That this is ours now. He nodded. The three sat together for a while, the quiet stretching between them not as silence, but comfort. A rare thing. Later that night, after Sari had fallen asleep in the small back room of the cabin, Zia stood on the porch. Dean joined her, arms crossed, leaning beside her against the railing. You ever think we'd make it? He asked. Zia shook her head slowly. There were days I didn't think I'd wake up. Dean looked at her, more seriously now. And now, she turned to face him. Now I can breathe. He reached out and gently took her hand. Not forceful, not symbolic, just honest. She didn't pull away. I never thought I'd belong anywhere again, she said. But this place, with you, it feels real. Dean's voice lowered. That's because it is. They stood like that for a long time, hand in hand, under a sky filled with unfamiliar stars. There were no alarms, no orders, no shadows around the edges, just the hum of night insects, the rustle of leaves in soft wind, and a quiet future built from broken pieces that didn't stay broken. Later, before bed, Dean checked the outer relay. Still no inbound signals. No trace of new threats. No encoded messages from Senate subchannels. Just open air. He shut it off, locked the console, walked back inside. Zia waited for him in the center room, sitting on the edge of the couch, barefoot, her hair tied back. Her eyes met his, and something unspoken passed between them. They didn't need to talk about what they'd been through. They didn't need to wonder if it would ever come back. They had now. Dean crossed the floor slowly, sat beside her. You know, he said quietly, this tent wasn't exactly what I imagined when I thought of settling down. Zia smiled. I don't mind the roof as long as you're under it. He looked at her, heart steady for the first time in years. Then let's make this home. Outside, the wind shifted, but the storm was long gone. And for once in their lives, they didn't have to run.